Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. So in case you didn't know, the 3DS turned 10 years old about a week ago. But man, it's kind of hard for me to even think about the idea that the 3DS is 10 years old now because, at least for me, I kind of end up in this like boomer state of mind where it's hard for me to forget that, like, certain things aren't new anymore. You kind of end up thinking, like, man, this is the new thing, and before you know it, the new thing is a decade old, but I figured I'd make this to kind of talk about the 3DS and my history with it and some of the standout games for the system, at least for me, because I really do think of it as being, like, one of my favorite video game systems ever. Like, I honestly probably put, other than, like, on PC, I probably put the most amount of time into 3DS games out of pretty much any system. Dude, man, when the 3DS came out, I wasn't even in high school yet. That's freaky. So normally I'm the kind of person who really never cares too much about like console releases. It's always the kind of thing that like you get excited about it, you buy it for way too much money, and then it kind of just sits there because there's usually not a whole lot of games. But for me, for whatever reason, the 3DS was different. Like, the Nintendo DS was one of my most played systems, so I was obviously gonna get the sequel to the Nintendo DS. And so I remember getting it the weekend that it came out. It was like basically my late birthday present. My birthday is in February, the thing came out in March, so I got it along with Nintendogs and Cats, and I got Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition. But I figured we could get this out of the way and kind of talk about the 3D gimmick. I think the 3D for the 3DS is probably one of the most like quickly dropped like gimmicks ever, or maybe not dropped, but just kind of like forgotten about. And it was like a cool idea, right? I think I have to at least give it to Nintendo for coming up with cool ideas, but things that maybe don't necessarily like pan out in the long run. You know, the 3DS having the 3D, or the Wii U having the gamepad, or the Switch being portable. It's like, it's stuff that's kind of cool, but after a while you're like, oh yeah, it's just a part of the thing. And the 3D thing was like, it was cool for the first, you know, few hours of having the system. Just being able to flick on the little, you know, the slider and, oh man, it's 3D and you don't even need glasses. You know, this was back like 10 years ago when 3D was like the big thing everybody was into. Do y'all remember when every movie that came out was like a 3D movie? Go see it in 3D! That was a slightly obnoxious part of our history, but yeah, after a while, I just like stopped even playing with the 3D. It was the kind of thing that like, it made me nauseous. You had to look at it a very specific way and not really move the screen at all. But the appeal of the 3D definitely lost its luster after a while. Like, I think even Nintendo themselves kind of gave up on it, because you know, they released the 2DS and that doesn't have the 3D functionality, and the longer into the system's lifespan you go, you see a lot less of like games that are trying to be like, whoa, 3D. Things stopped being called blah 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 3D or whatever and kind of just became games, which was probably for the better in the long run. And speaking of games, this system suffered from a horrifically awful lack of games for the longest time. If you got this thing, you know, launch weekend, you were struggling to find something to play. I'm not going to go through the whole list of launch games, but just a couple that stand out is like Nintendogs and Cats, that's one I got. Street Fighter 4 3D, I got that one. And then there was like Lego Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars, Bust-A-Move Universe, Rayman 3D, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. And speaking of shadows, this video is brought to you by Rage Shadow Legends. Not really, but yeah, just a very lackluster launch lineup. Like, at most, you might say, oh yeah, I like, I don't know, Super Monkey Ball. I'll pick up Super Monkey Ball 3D. But really no, like, system sellers on it. There wasn't a big Mario or a Pokemon or anything like that that would really draw people to it. And that's kind of just how it was for a good while. There was very little to play, and it felt like there was just this stretch of basically nothing coming on the horizon. Obviously, you know, down the line, we're gonna get Pokemon and Zelda and whatever else it happens to be. But for the first few months, it was just like, oh man, please, like, announce something. And that leads us into the Ambassador program, which was something that was available to, you know, early purchasers of the 3DS. I think anybody who bought it within the first, like, 6 months or so was able to become a 3DS Ambassador, which meant that you got a whole bunch of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games for free. And they were a nice little distraction. It was kind of cool having, you know, some of these GBA games on the system, and something that has always surprised me is the fact that they were true to their word when they said that those GBA games would always be Ambassador exclusive. They never made them available on the eShop or anything like that. They always stayed exclusive to Ambassadors, which I think is kind of cool. Like, obviously you can go and you can mod your 3DS and put all those GBA games on there, but it's kind of neat being part of this, like, exclusive club of idiots who bought the thing when it was at $249 and had to suffer for months. It's called the Idiots Club. But now it's time to talk about some games. So I'm kind of just going out of order here, but one of the biggest, like the first kind of standout games for the system I really remember was Fire Emblem Awakening. Yes, I am an Awakening babby, but I feel like at this point, like being an Awakening babby is not the worst sin, considering the game is like nearly 10 years old. That's another one that kind of freaks me out, but Awakening, I think, took a lot of people by surprise from, you know, just how well it ended up doing over here. And I think it really was just this perfect storm of, you know, nobody having basically anything to play on the 3DS, and also the fact that Awakening and Fire Emblem in general was in this very unique position. At least at the time, I think if you asked most people if they had heard of Fire Emblem, they would say yes, because of, you know, Smash Brothers. But if you asked most if they've played it, they would probably say no. So it was just this really nice combination of it being kind of unfamiliar, but just familiar enough for a lot of people to want to give it a try. And the game, like, reviewed really well over here, so it was kind of just this perfect storm. Perhaps too perfect? Like, I don't know how many of y'all remember this, but trying to get your hands on a copy of Awakening was really difficult. Nintendo vastly underestimated how many people would want that game. Like, I remember wanting it for my birthday, and my dad said he had to go to, like, a Target in another town to find a copy. But yeah, I really enjoyed Awakening. It was definitely very different from, like, anything else I had played at that point, but even though these days I would say it's not really one of my favorite Fire Emblems, it's definitely one that, like, introduced me to the series, and one that I do have a certain soft spot for. And I also have to thank the 3DS for my fixation with Monster Hunter. Technically, the first time I played a Monster Hunter was Tri on the Wii, and I did not understand it in the slightest. That game caused me frustration. Part of my problem was that I was playing it with the motion controls, but it just never clicked with me. And fast forward a couple years later when 3 Ultimate was new, for whatever reason, something compelled me to give it another try, and I really enjoyed it. Monster Hunter, I think, is a series that definitely requires a certain amount of, like, getting into it to really enjoy it. It's kind of like an MMO, where the more you play it, the more kind of enjoyment you get out of it as, like, more of it opens up to you. And even though I played a lot of 3 Ultimate, 4 Ultimate was the one that, like, fucked me up. I was playing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate all the time. Like, I would have my 3DS just constantly sitting there on standby mode with Monster Hunter 4, and anytime I had, like, just a moment to mess around with it, I would be. I think for a while, 4 Ultimate was, like, probably my most played game. It was definitely up there for a very long time. And the thing that really pains me about Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate is the fact that going back and trying to play it on that tiny little screen is, like, impossible for me. You know, now that I've been spoiled with, like, Generations Ultimate and Rise and World on these big screens, now I'm like trying to go back to 4 Ultimate on the little 3DS screen is, like, headache-inducing. So it's in this really weird kind of state for me where it's one of my most played games ever. I would definitely say it's one of my favorite games, but trying to go back and play it now is kind of painful, and that sucks to say, but man, the 3DS's screen is not enjoyable. Kid Icarus Uprising, another great one. Dog, Kid Icarus Uprising needs, like, a Switch port badly. Just what a fun, unique game. Like, when Sakurai is able to, you know, just make something non-Smash related, he hits it out of the fucking park. Great cast of characters, really enjoyable dialogue. It's just like a really fun game. And the 3DS was, of course, also home to Smash 4 for 3DS. What an interesting piece of technology that was. I didn't own a Wii U, nor did anybody, so Smash for 3DS was kind of my only option for Smash Brothers that, you know, console cycle. And looking back, it's like, man, how on earth did I play that? But I don't know, I think the dinkiness of it was kind of fun. It was cute in a way. It was like a kid trying its best. Another one, this is definitely one of my top, like, 3 favorite 3DS games, is Dragon Ball Fusions. If you are a Dragon Ball fan and you have not played Fusions, you are missing out, dog. This is probably my favorite Dragon Ball game. It really is just a love letter to everything that is Dragon Ball. It has such a fun gameplay system that's so unique. Like, I really can't think of anything else that has a system quite like it. The dialogue is so great. It's just like, oh man, Dragon Ball Fusions is so fucking good. If you like Dragon Ball, you absolutely have to play it. I would commit unspeakable crimes to get a Dragon Ball Fusions 2 on the Switch. That is like one of my dream games, dude. And finally, I think the standout thing about the 3DS for me is its huge lineup of S&T games. If you want to get into the larger kind of Megami Tensei series, I always tell people you should either get a PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3, although the PS3 option is looking a little sketchy these days because their store is getting shut down. But you get one of those two and you get a 3DS. And between those two, that's like the bulk of the more modern games on the systems. Just like, dude, both of the Devil Survivors, SMT4 and 4 Apocalypse, and then there's Soul Hackers, and then there's the Persona Q games, and it's like, Deep Strange Journey is on there. It's like, dude, this system is fucking stacked with SMT games. Like, I could ramble on and make an entire video about each of these games individually, let alone the system's entire library of them, but a lot of these games, sadly, have become weirdly expensive over the past few years, so at this point, your best bet is to get them through the eShop. So I would say definitely buy those games from the eShop while you can, or if you get lucky and you happen to find a physical copy somewhere, snag that bitch. Get it. But yeah, looking back on the 3DS, it really is kind of surprising just how much of, like, an influence it had on the kind of games that I like. You know, Monster Hunter, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours playing those games on 3DS. It introduced me to Fire Emblem. While it didn't introduce me to Megami Tensei, I mean, you know, the games I listed are a pretty sizable, like, amount of the library of these games. And I don't know, I feel kind of appreciative of the little guy's existence. Even though it had a very, very, very slow start, I think that, you know, towards the middle-ish of its life cycle, this thing was killing it. And even though I'm obviously sad to see it be, you know, retired by Nintendo, I still gotta give it up for the 3DS. Having a 10-ish, not quite 10 years, more like an 8-year cycle of consistently getting good games, I think is something worth praising. So yeah, thank you 3DS, I love you dearly, you will always be my wonderful little system baby. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. In the comments, make sure to let me know some of your favorite 3DS games, some memories you might have with the system, and we can all reminisce and enjoy its existence together. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.